Hello, everyone. Today we'll be doing a little bit of a different type of interview than our normal um, artist interviews. And I just wanted to give a slight disclaimer that this interview, um, if you have little ears, this one might need to be listened to alone first before we let little ears listen as well. It does talk about some heavy themes about the author's parents growing up in Hungary during World War II. So um, there are some hard topics that come about because of the uh, tortures of the Holocaust. That is a reality that we have to still try to understand, or at least I am still trying to understand. And as the author says, trying not to repeat these same issues. Um, Another first about this podcast is that Dr. Wolf is a Jewish author. So while I think every other guest has been a Christian so far, his story and his parents' stories are just so powerful. I really wanted to include him in our podcast lineup for season one. I think there's a lot to learn, and like you said, there's a lot of opportunities for friendship, understanding, working together as a community. I never want to be exclusive in an unhealthy way, and so I really think that including this podcast in this series really does kind of give us a different perspective on what writing can really do in a healing way, in an informative way. Um, and I'm really happy that I was able to talk to Dr. Wolf about this. Um, there is some slight language. I always try to leave the podcasts as original as they are recorded. And I think that it's not because I don't want to edit them, it's because I think we need to be aware of what's real. And I know there is an AI program that's connected to this recording program that edits out some of my ums and some of my hesitations. So there's already AI editing going on, which I don't love. But I do want to keep these as real and authentic as possible in a world that is becoming very um, doctored and strict in an unhealthy way towards false reality. So, all that to say, lots of firsts in this podcast, um, focusing more on history and a survivor of the Holocaust and communist Hungary, um, as well as hearing from a um, Jewish perspective rather than a Christian perspective. Um, I might not agree with everything he says, but that doesn't mean that he shouldn't say it. And I think that's what we need to keep our minds open to, is not to be afraid of something different just because it's different, but to um, use our critical thinking caps and connect on a level that God would want us to see the human and not um, the human as different, which is again one of the themes of preventing a repeat of the scenarios that his parents went through, is looking beyond just a body and seeing a soul there as well. So all of that to say, I hope you enjoy the upcoming interview. All right, without further ado, hello and welcome back to the God the Artist podcast. I'm your host, Morgan McCarver, and today we have special guest, Dr. Robert Wolf. Rob, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure to be here, and I'm very honored you asked me. Thank you.
I'm really excited to talk about this. I think you are, no, definitely you are our first Jewish guest, and I'm really excited to talk about your family and how that turned into a book. So, how did you decide to write all of this down?
Yeah, well, you got another hour. um, uh, well, my mom and dad wrote his autobiography in the 1970s. They literally went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc. Their his diatribes, his memoir, whatever you want to call it, they wrote the stories as though they had happened the previous day. They were really crisp and clear, very articulate, and I guess they meant it for me as just something to leave behind in case they didn't get to talk about everything that he went through. But um, yeah, so this is back in the 70s when they finally got to the United States. They were Hungarian refugees. I'm the first generation American born in Detroit. But in the 70s, I was still just a kid. And I probably read the manuscript once, maybe when I was 25, 30 years old. I don't remember exactly, but I didn't think much of it. This was just on a paper printed manuscript, and I didn't think much of it. I remember my dad's first escape. He had four of them. I don't remember the other ones, but I remember his first escape. It was quite harrowing. Uh, and then, he didn't. Well, we talked about the Holocaust and history quite a bit, off and on, the last half of my life. Not so much the first half, because I was more pre-med and med school. Became a radiologist. You have a family, you've got life, and you're busy. So, and then later on, after my dad passed away in '97, unfortunately, my mom passed away in 2016, and a historian friend handed me the disc now. The stories on the disc said you really got to read this, and I didn't even think much of it then. It took a year to take care of mom's affairs. And then I retired for a year. Went back to work as a radiologist part time, reading from home, and that brought me back to the disc. And between reading cases on the left screen, reading as a radiologist on the left screen, we've got the list of patients. On the right screen, the images, and then between cases, I on the left screen was my dad's autobiography, and I dictated it into a biography, not word
Mm.
for word, but with as much fidelity as possible, and of course double checking the history behind it because there is a lot of history in the book. So, and I was motivated by the miracles, the stories, the escapes. It's just it's unbelievable, and the messages, anti-Semitism, determination, and I couldn't leave it on a disc. I couldn't leave it on a computer. So I think I needed to share it with the world. So it was a pretty good motive. I know that they left the stories for me to see to tell me what happened to them, but I never thought that I would write about it. I never thought that I would actually, but maybe my parents did. And I always joke, don't you hate it when your parents are right? And they sure were.
Wow, that is incredible. So you really got to experience or understand, I guess, your father's experience of being a Holocaust survivor. Was your mother involved in that as well?
She was. I can't say her story wasn't as harrowing. It's different. And she didn't document, for as much as she educated and talked about the Holocaust and history, she wrote very little about her life. She talked about it a lot, but she didn't really write things down in minutia, in details like my dad did, even though she definitely helped him with his story. But she did mostly hiding. She was with her mom, her grandmom, her uncle, her aunt, many places, farms, out in Christian homes, Jewish homes, places in Budapest, really in a big scramble, and but always in hiding. And my dad had a different. My dad was a young man, so he was very helpful, and so he ended up getting hauled off to forced labor camp. And we could talk more about that. It's a big part of the book, and he did escape from two forced labor camps, but. Mom never got caught. She was well, actually, once she was in the line. She was in the line. They were being marched away, and somehow they escaped. And she never I remember her telling that story, but she never documented it in writing, so I can't really verify the details of it. But we
Hmm.
sure can with my dad. He escaped in what they thought was a death march in the middle of nowhere. So, but yes, my
Wow.
mom was 11 years younger than my dad. So while he was off at forced labor camp at age 21, 22 years old, my mom was mostly hiding. And Hungary got hit later in the war. Hungary got hit in 43, 44, as far as the Jewish rounding up the Jews and taking them to Auschwitz for mass genocide.
Yeah, I think a lot of times we forget that Hungary actually is involved in World War II. So yes, I'd love to talk about your dad's story. Let's start, I guess, where you start at the beginning, wherever that is, if that's at the beginning of his life or the beginning of the Holocaust. How does that kind of start?
Well, I have a great co-author, Janice, and she helped me polish the book because if I'd self-published and done it the way I originally wrote it, it would have been point A to B to C. Dad was born here, Dad did this, Dad did that, and it would have been really quite dull and tedious. Well, she helped me change the stories around. You know that the chronology is changed, it's switched around a bit, and there's parallel stories, converging stories. You know, letters to and from home, um, and uh, conversations that enliven the story. But we really start. It's World War II. It's when my dad was first taken away to forced labor camp. He never had left the house, and that's how we start the book. And then we kind of diverge back and forth between my dad's experiences at the forced labor camp, the slave labor camp, and the fears and the that his parents had to put up with, the anxiety, the unknown. When was that door going to knock? When were they? Because they knew that things were not going well for the Jewish people. So, and meanwhile, they're just hoping that the war would end. So the things are in and out of order. The second half of the book, not as much. We talk about communist Hungary, post-war Hungary, and like you said, not a lot of people know about the history, including me. Before I dove into this project, into this journey, I really didn't know a whole hell of a lot about the history of Hungary either. So I can't say I'm an expert, but I know a lot more about what happened in Hungary between World War One and the end of the Hungarian Revolution in '56. Not a lot of people know about either. 3,000 people died in that war. It was about a 2 week war. Countless refugees, thousands of injuries, mostly a lot of young people, and my mom and dad were frontliners. Mom was in med school at the time. Dad was already practicing OBGYN, and he had to double down as a trauma surgeon. So that was another amazing story. And this is right before they left the country for good, and that will have been my dad's fourth escape.
Wow. So, take us to the first moment of capture. Was he with his parents, or did they know it was coming? Were they trying to hide?
Okay, so no, you live with pride, you live with dignity. Can you imagine trying to pick up your family and just shag out and move elsewhere just overnight and bring whatever little that you can carry. So they didn't do that. So a lot of people did. A lot of people that were lucky and or smart or could afford to move out of Europe and to places that would be accepted, because you couldn't take that for granted either. Even Chinese accepted some. Of course, the United States, Israel, other countries, but not everybody did. It was a process. But for my dad's parents, they had a radio, which Jews were not allowed to have. They weren't allowed to listen, but they listened to the radio anyway. They'd catch the BBC at night when they could, at high risk. I mean, and they knew things weren't going well. They were just praying that the war would end soon, and they still had that cautious optimism that not everybody has. But my dad was not with them at that time. My dad was already taken away. So dad was taken away to the forced labor camp in October of 1943, and his parents weren't taken away by the Nazis until 1944, as were many, many Hungarian Jews. Over 500,000, it's estimated, 565,000 Jewish people perished during not all at Auschwitz, but a majority. But elsewhere in the country, the Danube, people know the Danube story. That wasn't part of my parents' thing, but they were there. 21,000 people were murdered in January. Sorry, December, January, if I'm not mistaken. It's been a while. So 1943, 44. It's a lot of people. I mean, and it was when the war coming to an end, and people made every effort to make more people suffer in their desperation to be whatever you want to call it, sadists, just fulfilling whatever charge they thought they had to. I don't know. It wasn't like Schindler's List, where, well, the war's over and all the Nazis just walked out of the room, which is what happened. Whereas they could have killed everybody, or desperately just, and they didn't. So anyway, it didn't well. The Hungarians were really treated poorly. But even before the war, anti-Semitism on the rise in the 30s, just like our internet now, our social media. They had newspapers, the Arrow Cross, which was a horrible organization, kind of like, I guess, the Gestapo. You could compare it to the Gestapo. They were just an organization dead set on eradicating the Jews, either having them leave the country, leave Europe, or not having them around. And these people, they wrote these newspapers, and with the proliferation of anti-Semitic hate, and of course we're seeing it now, especially on the internet and the social media, like I said. But And then they had limited, they had restricted. My dad's father couldn't work. He was a dentist, a real threat to society. Had to leave his government job. My dad was kicked off the swim team in high school because he was Jewish. So, and like I said, they couldn't own a radio. They could only shop at certain times. Jewish weddings were illegal. At least they certainly were in under the communists. I assume so under the Nazis too. It's not really talked about because my dad was too young to get married, and his parents were already married before all this rise. Before that, Jewish people did okay. They integrated well in the they say in the late 19th century, in the late the 1890s and before World War One, the Jewish people were well integrated in Europe, were well respected and established, and somehow they just sort of spiraled down uh, by the middle of the 20th century. And we worry
Mm.
about this kind of thing going on now today. So that's kind of why that kind of sums up why I'm doing all this because I'm down here in Southern Florida. I should be chasing bikinis and golf balls, and here I am doing podcasts and chasing authors and readers and producers and the like, and just people who care, just people to. That's all I'm doing is just get people to realize the perils of the hate and what happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. And please enjoy what we have here, appreciate what we have, and let's just try to bind together Jewish, Christian, Muslim, Hindu, whatever. And I have a lot of friends in all parts of the world and all kinds of religions too. So I wish more people would take a page off of that.
Mm. Well said. Yeah, I am shocked at how things so recent as the Holocaust do seem to circle back around so quickly. Um, but tell us a little bit about your father. You mentioned he was captured or he escaped 4 times. Can you give us, without spoiling the whole book, of course, can you give us a little detail into
Yes,
that?
I'm happy to. It's exciting. You try to picture it. We're working on a documentary, by the way, and we're hoping that the
Mm,
documentary is popular enough that somebody decides to transform into a full feature film because it easily could be. I would call it Schindler's List on steroids with all the escapes. I mean, but no, they were taken away. They were. It was called the paramilitary, the forced labor camp. He and his friend Frank and a whole slurry of people from not only from his town but all over Hungary, even guys that were taken away, the bullies in his school, taken away a year before, and they'd already been at forced labor camp a year before my dad was there. Um, yeah, it was horrific. They in the middle of the mountains, in the middle of nowhere, digging trenches, trying to defuse the landmines, placing landmines, uh, laying airport strips, trying to whatever. Sometimes arduous tasks that didn't even make sense just to make them work, trying to push railroad cars filled with crap on rusty wheels and rusty tracks, all kinds of crap. And they were beaten and they were urinated on and they starved and they had all kinds of illnesses. And their living quarters were deplorable. They were living in places like barn stables where sheep and horses and cows lived. Not much, and if they were lucky enough to have bunks in some of these quarters, they had to double up or triple up, side by each, as they say, side by, one big spoon festival, and really sad, real scary. Sometimes they had to walk an hour just to go get some food, and if they were lucky, they got fed, once a day. And meat was over the top. Like if they could get meat once a month or every other, and you'd be surprised at the people that helped them. Local peasants at risk helped the men. Either they would pay them for some food, and they had to sneak around to do that kind of thing. So it was really, really a horrible. The way my dad described it, it's just so real. But okay, so the escapes. So yeah, I want to live in something. Who wants to live in something like that? So they were marching all over. They marched to work. They marched from place to place, uh, and they didn't get much information. But towards the end of World War II, at least for Hungary, somehow they got wind of that news. But the men were Jewish, and they didn't know, should we be in Hungary? Should we be in Austria? They didn't even know where they were. What if the Germans won? What if the Russians win? Where does that put us? If we're in Austria and the Germans are already there and they win the war, then yeah, we're just handing ourselves to them. So, and then death marches were something that weren't talked about. They talked about them in the Far East, but not so much in Europe. So death marches were a part of, and my dad and his friend Frank thought legitimately that these guys are desperate. The war could be ending, and they have no more use for us. So what are they? They're just going to kill us out here in the mountains, and nobody's going to know. and they decided to escape. They had about a 3 day window. They kind of planned it out. They left at dusk. They sort of pulled themselves towards the end of the line, away from the closest guard, and then 1, 2, 3, go. And it was just like that. Your heart's pounding just reading about the scene, and like Chris Berman used to say, tumbling, bumbling, stumbling in the woods, in the snow, in the thicket, not knowing where they're going, and just running and running and running until they finally were exhausted and tried to find a place to hide in the middle of the thicket, knowing that they would be chased. And that's exactly what happened. The guards were going after them, and dog. A third guy chased after them too. So that's kind of funny. That was a funny story. The guy survived the war too, but he got caught when my dad and his friend Frank were hiding, and they could actually hear him getting caught. And I can't imagine that sound if the guy was getting beaten or the dogs biting him or whatever the case would be. I mean, I can't imagine the fear there. So anyway, it's a really it's a movie. It's a Tom Cruise running scene at the max. It would be he would be the guy to play my dad in that scene because of the running, and they end up so they escape, and they were supposed to split up. I'm not going to spoil it. They were supposed to split up, but yet they found each other in the middle of nowhere, which is another miracle. There's 20 miracles in this book, but second escape, they were, they finally made their way down to Budapest, and they had a little comfort. But it was short term, and they had help, but they still are on the run. They still had to watch themselves, and they got double crossed one day. This truck driver offers to give them a ride from point A to point B, and he ends up dropping them off at what they call the dog pound, where they collected escaped prisoners, escaped forced laborers. So the guy screwed them over, and so now they didn't know where they were going to get killed, executed, reassigned to imprisoned or reassigned to another labor camp. But there they were, trapped downtown Budapest, across from the Nazi headquarters in Budapest, and they planned it out. They had a plan, and they did a short-term escape. A lot of luck. They escaped between guards marching around the buildings, and ended up on a streetcar and took off. And that one's a heart raiser too. It just it wakes you up. It's an amazing um, and that was with his friend Frank too. So two escapes with his friend Frank. And then the third one, he was a med student. Decided he'd had enough of communism. He was happy to finally be in a med school because there was a quota for Jewish people. Only 10% of medical students were allowed to be Jewish at the time, but they needed med students because so many people had died during World War II. But he just had enough, and he decided to go to the border. And he argued, he bullshit, forgive me, his way with an armed Russian guard, saying he had to go fix some radiology equipment, ironically, radiology equipment. And he challenged the guy. He challenged the guard. He said, "Go ahead, call the hospital administrator, see if I'm bluffing or not." And he got through, but he got nervous. He thought suddenly he had this fear of reprisal in case he got caught. What would that do to his medical career? This and that. So he turned around, changed his mind, went back to Budapest, and he was on call the next night. Nobody even knew he was gone. And finally, my dad's fourth escape with my mom was at the end of the Hungarian Revolution. And like I said, they were frontliners. Mom ran the blood bank as a med student. Dad doubled down as a trauma surgeon. And by then, they had it. They had the Nazis, they had the communists, they had World War II, and they had the Hungarian Revolution, and Jews were not being treated well, and they still felt like second-class citizens. And they'd rather just die taking a chance trying to escape or be imprisoned, and so they did it. And that was a harrowing escape too. So well worth the read. And it's of course it's towards the end of the story, but because we bring it to Austria, most of the story takes place in Hungary, of course. Yeah, and he missed an escape. It's another miracle. He missed an escape, and he went to the wrong train station, and everybody who went to the right train got arrested, including his medical school
Oh,
classmate. So the luck on this guy is, as the Sopranos would say, the luck on this guy. I prefer to think it's the hand of God. With all of these miracles, the people he ran into, and how he escaped, and the split-second timing, if you don't believe in God before you read this book, you will. I don't care if you're
wow.
Jewish, Christian, Muslim. It's the story is just you couldn't be a luckier gambler in Vegas. I mean, you just it's astounding, astounding.
That's amazing. And so he survives the war and then is in communist, is it Austria or Hungary at that point?
Hungary, well, yeah, Austria we call the West, like England, France. They were liberated by the West, the United States, France, Britain. But Hungary was not part of that. Hungary was with Poland, Romania, Czechoslovakia, where I can't think of all the Ukraine, more on the Russian, more of the of the Russian. I mean, the United States had never worked so closely with the USSR except then, and then since then, of course, we had the Cold War, and I'm not convinced the Cold War's ended myself with what's going on, but I'll let you guys decide for yourself. I don't get real political, but I do believe in political freedom, which is what my mom and dad will tell you about. With it, when the end of all of this, with the anti-Semitism and the BS and the putting me down, putting us under the shoes, just being able to vote and to have a say and be able to go to work or shop or own a car. You know, all these things that we take for granted. That's where my mom would thrive. So now, and that's a great point you bring up. Like if the United States um, had won in Hungary, if they had occupied Hungary after the war or during the war instead of Russia, then Hungary could have ended up being a democratic nation for all these years instead of being communist for many, many decades. I could have grown up. I might have grown up there, and they may never have moved, and maybe I would have been raised in Hungary, and we wouldn't even be having this discussion because I'd have a different life. So it's just a weird speculation, but I don't think one country could just win the whole war by themselves. World War II was definitely about the team effort. We'll see going forward obviously in the Middle East and elsewhere, but what a mess. And we don't learn. This anti-Semitism, it's reared its ugly head again. It's, I'm Jewish, I'm a scapegoat. I've got everything to do with Gaza. I've got everything to do with, right? I mean, it's just,
Hmm.
it's ridiculous.
It is. How did your parents reach America?
Well, that would be part two, book part two. And, we didn't, the book was getting long, so we had to stop when they first got to Vienna. But my dad chronicled what happened between then and all the way into the 70s when he wrote his autobiography. So, and it was a harrowing trip from, ironically, Western Germany to the Ellis Island in New York City. But it is documented what they went through with a bunch of Hungarians. They had an old U.S. Hand-me-down military ship that they used. The men were separated from the women. They were down in the bottom of the ship, and it was leaking. They had an inch or two of water, maybe more. My dad got seasick. He got seasick, so my mom snuck him up to one of the upper decks so he could get some fresh air. The women they tried to make Hungarian goulash. They tried to make chicken paprika with whatever little things, whatever tidings they had to make meals, and they got through it. And my mom's father met them in New York when they finally got there. It was like a 1 month boat ride. Can you imagine in the North Atlantic in
Mm.
December, January? It was cold, and the captain even said that he never recalled the weather being that bad in the North Atlantic. So it was cold and wet and choppy and just not an easy ride. But they made it, and and then my mom's father, who she hadn't seen in 18 years, picked them up at Ellis Island. They went through the paperwork, which sounded relatively easy. And then he took them to Providence, Rhode Island, where their life was very uncomfortable for a while. They didn't speak much English. They didn't have work. They didn't know where they were going. They sorted it out over time. My dad ended up redoing his residency in Boston at a Harvard affiliate, which is amazing. That's quite a feat for somebody who barely speaks English. Because I couldn't get into any Harvard residency, I don't think, in any specialty, especially now. I mean, it's just so competitive. But he got in, and he had to take English classes. He took elementary school and high school English classes, and my mom did research at the time, and this was all in Boston. And then they made their way through. It wasn't easy. The first half of their lives definitely not an easy time. And so whatever, if you believe in, I'm not big into entitlement, but if anyone was worthy of an improved life, it was definitely my parents with the things they went to, and of course many other people that were tortured and persecuted over the years during the Holocaust and afterward.
Mm. So did you grow up with a lot of Hungarian traditions then?
Oh yeah, that's a great question. Well, we ended up in Detroit because after my dad finished his residency, there were no jobs in Boston, so I ended up in Detroit. I was born and raised there. A lot of Eastern European people in the Michigan area, the Detroit area. We have Hamtramck, which is the little Polish town in Detroit. It still exists. But my parents, oh yeah, they loved it. They had Hungarian friends, Greek friends, Czech, Transylvania. I mean, the anatomy, I call it the anatomy, it's geography, but of Europe, it's changed so many times. World War I, World War II, you need a program to keep up. but Transylvanian, Hungarians, Romanian, you didn't know who was from where. And my mom and dad loved all of that. They had a lot of friends that were American. We had a lot of American Jewish friends in my town growing up. But friends from all over the world. Like I said, they love to meet people. They love to share their experiences. They love to learn about other people's cultures and religions. And hopefully, I take a page off of that, doing this, but also meeting people around wherever I live, trying not to shy away, trying to understand how people are. Down here in Southern
Mm.
Florida, it's a really mixed bag too. We've got Hispanic, Latino, New York, Canada, I mean, all kind, South America, Caribbean. So I love it. I love the different cultures, and my parents were the same way. So Hungarian culture, food, Hungarian goulash parties. My mom and dad, he had an outdoor big spick, like a big fire pit with a tripod and this huge hanging metal bowl that was cooking chicken puck because enough to feed 100 people, and you could smell the food for miles. It was unbelievable. And they'd have two consecutive parties. They'd have my dad being a doctor. He'd have a party for his doctor colleagues and the neighbors, and then he'd have one for all his Hungarian friends. It was, believe me, that was crazy. They'd have the violin, and the guy playing the Hungarian violin, the chardash, the gypsy tradition, whatever, and they loved it. They brought a little Hungary with them, but they left the Nazism and the communism behind. Yeah, and they liked other cultures too: French, German, Greek. Like I said, they loved to travel. They loved education. But yeah, Hungarian culture was definitely a part of growing up.
I think that's so cool. Coming to America, your parents, would you say they had a harder time fitting in because they were Jewish or fitting in because they were Hungarian?
Good question. I don't think being Jewish was an issue for them back then. I don't think it really ever was. Speaking English was probably the first thing, and as you may or may
Mm.
not, when you move to a new area, it's hard to meet new people. The older you get, even more so. But my dad, in the part two of the book, he talks about his best friend, Milt Simmons. He's still around. He's 95. He was a resident in family practice. He's retired a while ago now, and he comes down here to Southern Florida. I see him once a year when he comes down here to visit. A great guy. But he was my dad's first friend in Detroit. And then by the time he got established and got his practice going as a partner with this group, then slowly he met other people. It's hard when you're struggling just to find a job and find a place to fit. And of course, he started in Detroit, and the urban blight in the 60s was coming around, and the riots were coming. And my parents saw that, and I was like, geez, have we not gone through enough? But I think they love Detroit, but they just, right where they were was in the epicenter of what could have been a disaster. Because a couple of years later, obviously, they had the race riots, not just in Detroit, as you know, New York, Chicago, L.A., all over.
Mm. Yeah. Wow. That's amazing though that you get to keep up with your dad's friend. Has he been able to read the book?
Who's that? Oh, Milt? Yeah, he loved it.
Hmm.
Yeah, in fact, he said, and he's not the only one. Now, in between when the book was in print a few years back and now, a few of his friends have died, all at remarkable ages: 99, 98, 103. Milt's 95. I mean, the youngest, my dad was probably the youngest, but that's another story. He survived two open heart surgeries here in the United States. It's unbelievable. I mean, everything he went through, and still lived into his 70s. But yeah, Sid Gersh, another friend of his, long, long friend since we moved to United States. Well, my final home as a kid, and my mom's final home in Michigan. Sid Gersh was a great neighbor, a good friend of theirs, and yeah, he read the book. They all loved the book. They said, and they all said, your dad and mom told us a lot of stories, but they didn't tell us everything. And I guess that's what I got out of the book too. It's just packed with little anecdotes and stories. Um,
Mm.
yeah. So, and unfortunately, my mom and dad had both passed before and if you knew me 8 years ago, I had such Holocaust fatigue from my mom. I had a Holocaust burnout that you would have said this guy would never write about the Holocaust. He'd never write about anti-Semitism. And here we are, 8 years, 7, 8 years down with the project, and that's exactly what I'm doing. So I got the zap from
Wow.
my mom and dad, and it'd be nice, if you believe in the afterlife, of course, and people looking down on their kids or their relatives or just about anybody else. If you really believe in heaven and earth, then hopefully they're looking down and saying, well, this is a pretty good book, and. But I always joke, my mom, with her Hungarian Jewish guilt, and forgive my Hungarian accent, You, Robbie, you couldn't do this while we were still alive. And I can just see her saying that, and well, sorry, Mom, at least I did it, so better late than never.
Yeah.
Another lesson, it's never too late to do the right thing, I guess. And
Hmm.
I guess I'm an example of that too.
Yeah, I love that. And it seems like they knew, like you said at the beginning, they knew you were going to take what they had given you since they had written it all down. I think that's just really cool that you're able to continue their legacy in that way.
Yeah, not everybody gets that. I mean, and a lot of people don't want to share the stories. A lot of people have severe PTSD, and they don't, or they just forget, or they want to forget, or they don't want the kids to know, or the world. And I get that. I mean, we talk about the PTSD in for Vietnam vets, and more recently Middle Eastern war vets. Afghanistan and uh, Iraq, and all these. There have been all these fights, and a lot of we they go so quickly relative to the lengthy world, World War One, World War Two, that we almost forget about them. But PTSD is definitely a thing. I'm amazed that my parents didn't have it. I guess they thwarted it by hard work, focusing on the future, educating and teaching about it, and in my dad's case, just staying busy as an OBGYN. Oh, he delivered 10,000 babies in his
Wow.
career, which is, it's redemption. We call it redemption, but it doesn't bring back the 50 or 60 million people that died in World War II, which is quite a range of an estimate, but that's what I've seen. That's the best number I can give.
Hmm.
One person's too much. I mean, we talk about 50, 60 million, nor does it bring back all the people that suffered under the communists, persecuted, tortured, murdered, imprisoned, unjustly disappeared. But it does bring back some life to the human world. And it's got to be a great feeling every time you deliver a baby. And it's a nice feeling when somebody reads my dad's book and says, "Oh, I had no idea your dad went through all this," and says, "I loved your dad. He delivered two of my kids, and they're
Hmm.
doing well." And that really makes your day. That's what I'm not looking for compliments, but it's nice hearing good things about my mom and dad still, uh, and starting, igniting that by reintroducing them through this book.
Hmm. I love that. Do you see a future where you would write more books?
Good question. Yeah, I got three in my head.
Wow.
I've been procrastinating. I don't know. One has been in my head for a long, long time. The things they don't teach in med school. It would be part
Hmm.
autobiography, part humor, like House of God, part teaching, like really teaching the things they don't teach in med school, like talk about taxes and insurances and burnout, investing, partnership tracks, lawsuits, um, med school, like med school basic, med school gross anatomy, med school basic classes, med school rotations, residence, all that kind of stuff. You could and short chapters would be the most appropriate. A lot of short chapters. It'd be funny. It'd be sad. Talk about some stories, my worst memories, my best memories, and let the person that reads it decide whether they want to try to apply to med school. Not meant to talk a person out of it, but a realistic look at. It's not just you go to school for 4 years and you get your degree. No, it's a lot of sweat, and plan on more sweat when you get done because it gets harder and harder. Because you're taking on more responsibility, so you work harder, and then you talk about the money, of course, and medicine's changed a lot. It's to me, I'm on the wrong end of the needle now. I joke, but it's not really a joke because I'm running away from the needles, and I got a lot of people to apologize to. But it's changed a lot, and I'm still trying to understand it myself as a consumer, as a patient, and we'll see how that works out. But I don't think they fumbled the ball when they were trying to make the price of healthcare down by adding all these HMOs and PPOs and insurance companies that I can't even understand what they do sometimes. And you're lost. I mean, it's made it more expensive, at least for me, out of my pocket. I don't know about for you. Fortunately, you're young. You're probably healthy. I know you've said you've had some medical issues, and so I mean, some people charge you more, some people not. But you move on and on. Back then in Hungary, Dad worked for probably a government salary, and it wasn't a lot. They never would have made a killing like you can here in the United States, but they're trying to curb that, of course, curtail that from the hospitals and the doctors with all these health plans, and it's worked. But I mean, doctors still do okay, hospitals still stay solvent, but it's a struggle. I mean, now it's gone. The money's shifted to middle people, the go-betweens and insurance companies, apparently.
Yeah, I would say you're right about that. Um, So through all of this, through your parents sharing their story, you're a radiologist, you're a father as well. What do you want your legacy to be?
Okay, to finish the other question before I forget, part two of my dad's book would be another book. It would be a shorter book and not as harrowing, but harrowing enough. And the fourth one would be the things, sorry, how to invest in the bear market. Not that I'm a Goldman
Mm,
Sachs guy, but I know enough about it that I could throw a book together for people because I think I know more about investing than 95% of people in this country. Almost certainly I could bet on that, maybe at least 90%. So as a friendly, as a friendly person to person, not sophisticated as there's so many people out there. Susie Orman, she's outstanding. But reading her and reading about Warren Buffett and just following it all, I mean, I certainly could put that. But I don't know. If even if I did all four books, the most important one will have been the one that I've done about my dad because the message is about anti-Semitism and it's a great book. The history and that's the legacy too.
mm,
It's a biography about my dad that with a recurrent theme of anti-Semitism. It's a reminder that of what happened 60, 80, 100 years ago, still going on now. It's the sad thing. The song remains the same, but the sad thing is that we find new ways to torture each other, persecute, steal, uh, maim, and kill each other, and that's the sad thing. And for different reasons, different excuses. And my legacy for my parents, giving back, I don't have kids myself, but giving this story back for my parents and to the world is to say, look, cut the crap. Let's work together to figure this out. I have nothing against you. You're Christian. I'm Jewish. I'd like to meet you in real life and say, take you out for coffee. That's another lesson. Stop protesting in the streets. Nobody cares. Stop shoving around Jewish kids that want to go to school. You're going to get everybody in trouble that way. You're not helping society. You're taking away from it. If that's what these people want, then I don't want them around. I mean, they can go back to whatever country that they're rooting for and go play soccer there if they want. Whatever. Don't disrupt our thing. Instead, help your neighbor out. Buy your neighbor a cup of coffee. Help somebody with their groceries. Go to a museum. Write a play. Write a book. Spend more time with your family. Volunteer somewhere, give back to the community. Just cut the crap, do something. If you're bored, change your vector. I certainly did, and I never thought I'd be doing this, but I feel better by just trying to do something good, give back to the community in my own little way. It's not about the money; it's about doing something that's right. So I guess that's and there's we talk about hope and determination, like resilience, loneliness, love, hate. We talk about all of it in the book and during presentations, and I guess with my dad's story, it enhances that. It's a way of reading an adventure, an exciting story, and bringing out emotions and thoughts that should stay with people and hopefully change people. At least it changes their thinking in a little way, and that's the legacy. I mean, it's whenever I hear the word legacy, I always think of Bill Clinton and his, and Bill Clinton's biography was this big, and Shaquille O'Neal and Bill Clinton. Oh boy, they write a biography. They got 100 writers and 100 editors lined up to help them with that. But little me, and Irvin Wolf, and you and other writers. We got to get out. I've got to get a telescope out to find somebody that wants to help me.
Yeah, I think that is beautiful that you're continuing that family legacy and that you're able to spread your message of love and, like you said, helping the community, working together. Um, and you're spreading that in a way that is through your writing. And I think that's such a more pleasant message than, like you say, protesting or some of the other ways. But speaking about finding readers, how would you say we should get in contact with you? What is a final word you'd share to our listeners? Where can we buy your book?
Well, before I tell you that, I know you wrote a book, and I know you've got a good story behind you, and I wish you the best of luck with that because I've seen a
Oh,
little bit
thank
of your
you.
story, and I hope that if I can help you in any way, if you do a book presentation in my neighborhood here in Southern Florida, let me know. I'd be happy to attend and buy you that cup of coffee or whatever, lunch. It'd be great to meet you, and I wish you well because I know you've got a good story, a heart warmer too, and I wish you the best on your journey. So. But
No,
yeah,
thank you.
Robert J. Wolf, MD. If you Google that, or if you Google "not a real enemy," you'll find me. I've got a website, a loaded website, robertjwolfmd.com. YouTube channel, Not a Real Enemy by Robert Wolf. That's loaded. A lot of great stuff. TV interviews, a lot of podcasts, some book presentations. I'm well over 200 between all of those. And I'm still going strong with just trying to spread this message and having fun. I'm meeting great people like you, and it's not all maudlin, So I do love other things: sports, music. I'm a foodie. I like golf. There's history, all this kind of thing that I know that the discussion here can be pretty serious, but so I'm on social media too. It's usually serious now. I do enjoy when I can getting on social media for just to have fun, but that's a rare moment. But I'm on X and Meta. I'm trying to stay up with all the lingo. X, Meta, Instagram, TikTok. Um, I mentioned the YouTube channel. I'm on what else? Blue Sky and LinkedIn, the most important one. I think LinkedIn is the best platform. It's the most professional. And if I had to give up all the social media except for one, LinkedIn would be the last one I'd give up because so Not a Real Enemy, Robert J. Wolf, MD. We're doing a documentary, hopefully out by the end of next year. It's going to be a 15 to 20-minute documentary. I hope that goes far, circulates people back to the book, but also in a different way, in a different platform, because we're all video oriented now. Our audiovisual skills have been tuned up. That doesn't mean our communication skills have, but our audiovisual skills have tuned up. So everybody wants to see it on Netflix, Hulu, whatever, a ball game, a concert. And in our case, a short documentary. Hopefully, it's effective. Yeah, look me up and please reach out. I do podcasts. We do book presentations. A review helps. Help me fight anti-Semitism because I can't do it alone. That's for sure.
I love that. And yeah, that we'll have to talk to you again after that documentary comes out.
That'd be
That
an
sounds
honor.
like, yeah, I'd love to catch up with you after that. I'm looking forward to watching it as well as reading the book.
That'd be an honor. I hope I run into you someday. Like I told you, my granddaughter's wedding is coming up in your neck of the woods, in the
Yeah.
mountains of Carolina. So maybe I'll meet you at the gas station, or I'll find you somehow. I appreciate
Yeah.
you inviting me. It's very kind of you. And like I said, I wish you the best too in your endeavors. Young, pretty, smart, honest, good smile. It'll take you a long way. And tell you, you're good in ceramics and you're good in art, that's something that would be a book I couldn't write about. So, but you should. You should. Oh my God, I was horrible at that stuff. Pottery. I love it. It was fun doing it, but it's just my product was, almost failed shop. The
Well,
Breakfast Club. I
there
did
you go.
shop. uh,
We've all got our special gifts, and I have just enjoyed this conversation so much. Thank you, and we'll talk to you again.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Bye.